Today's episode is brought to you by Positively Productive Systems, whose mission is to be the antidote to your stress and to provide compassionate productivity resources and coaching that help you heal and achieve. Be sure to check out both free and paid resources at positivelyproductive.com/resources.
At the end of the day, I think visibility is putting you in front of the people that your message needs to connect with. So that could be for the reason of getting more clients. That could be for the reason of growing your community. That could be just because you are a soul on a mission and you have a message to share. But it's getting yourself in the spots where those people are there to hear your message. Visibility could be as simple as being in front of one person and connecting with that person. So it can look different. Again, it depends on your unique business and your unique goals. But what it's not is, look, it's the me show. It's a connection between who you're getting in front of and who you are.
You're listening to the Positively Living Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Zaratny, founder of Positively Productive Systems and a coach certified in time and stress management, helping overwhelmed clients make space for what matters. Join me each episode as we explore ways to live a more proactive, productive life with topics and guests that speak to simplifying self-awareness, systems, and so much more. I understand overwhelm personally as a fellow multi-passionate entrepreneur, wife and mom to kids and cats, and former caregiver. I'm here to help you choose what's right for you so you can do less, live more, and breathe easier. Sound good? Let's get to it. Welcome to the Positively Living Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa, and I get to witness the power of collaboration each time I welcome a new guest to the podcast. Confession time? Not every episode ends up the way I planned it. Okay, so I know that's not really a confession, but it does bring up an important point that when my guests and I work together, the end result is often so much different and even better than we intended. It reminds me of the saying, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. To me, that's collaboration. And in today's episode, we'll touch upon that and more, highlighting what collaboration can do for you in terms of visibility, different ways to collaborate, and how to go about it in a way that's successful and satisfying. I'm excited to share today's return guest, Emily Aborn, with you, because she is not only a delight, she brings value to every conversation and project. I know this because she and I have collaborated with each other repeatedly. I'm a repeat guest on her podcast, She Built This, and I've been featured in her group of the same name. We also just recorded with Alicia Galati of Galati Media, who takes care of this podcast. And we talked all about, you can probably guess, podcasting. So if that's something you've been thinking about, stay tuned. Needless to say, Emily is an ideal choice for today's topic of collaboration. Emily's a content writer, podcast host, and founder of She Built This. Since 2014, she's had experience running brick and mortar as well as online businesses. She's worked with over 86 different industries and loves helping others increase their visibility, connect with their clients, and bring their dreams to life. For fun, she enjoys word games, reading, listening to podcasts, and tromping around in the woods with her husband Jason and their dog Clyde. Before we dig into the conversation, may I remind you that books and products we mention on the podcast are available on the favorites page of the Positively Productive website. That's positivelyproductive.com/favorites. On this page, I've also included many of my favorite tools, professional and personal, and it's my goal to help you choose what's right for you. So that is the focus of our conversations. But when you hear something you think could work for you, the favorites page gives you an easy way to find it. During the rapid wrap-up today, Emily shares a quote you'll want to catch about inner work from the book that she's reading. The title of it is The Instinctual Drives and the Enneagram by John Lukovich, and it's on the favorites page if you'd like to check it out. You may also want to catch episode 95 on tips to avoid burnout based on the Enneagram type. Now let's join Emily as she inspires us to collaborate. Welcome back, Emily Aborn to the Positively Living podcast. I'm crazy excited to get into our conversation today.
Thank you. Me too. You know, this is a topic near and dear to my heart.
Yes, and I have had so much fun collaborating with you, which is the topic of the day. But before we dig into all that, please tell us a bit about who you are, who you help, and most importantly, what lights you up.
You know what really is lighting me up right now is puzzles. I mean, I always love puzzles, but especially when it starts to get dark out early and it feels like every night you just want to stay in and be cozy. I love working on a puzzle. So that's one thing lighting me up. I am Emily Aborn and I'm a content writer, and I also love word puzzles and helping people solve their own word puzzles, their content puzzles. I love taking a big chunk of content and helping people kind of break it down into all these other forms and formats that help drive people to their websites and their businesses.
Yeah, I was going to say the puzzle thing really fits like across the board because that's something you really enjoy. And I think we have that in common of digging in, finding different ways to like move things around and really ultimately make things easier. The last time we talked about stress-free content creation because sometimes the whole content thing just feels like a lot, right? And you simplify it. I love that. Today, we thought, hey, why not talk about another aspect of visibility, which is collaboration? It's something we love to do, and it's something you and I have been doing quite a bit. Before recording this, we just came off of a recording with Alicia Galati of Galati Media and had so much fun doing that. So that's something that we've done, but really from your perspective, let's define what collaboration is. What is it to you and what could it look like?
Okay, I think I just want to give a little backstory about why it matters so much to me and why I see it as a leg of visibility that I think a lot of people pass over. So I used to own a retail shop. My husband and I owned it together, but I was primarily the one that would like woman the store, right? Like I was at the store all the time. And I kept myself in this very little tiny bubble where I just woke up every day, went to the store, went home, woke up every day, went to the store, went home. I didn't really like make a lot of connections. So my business kind of hit a little bit of a speed bump after about 3.5 years. And I met with a business advisor in our area. And she said to me, like, basically, she looked me in the eye and she's like, you need to put on like your baby brand new business pants, and get out there and go make some friends. And I was like, oh, scary. Oh no, oh no. But I said, you know what? I'm going to do it. And she specifically was talking about it was like a very health minded mattress store, like non toxic kind of bedding and organics and things like that. So specifically, she was talking about connecting with people in that same vein, like health minded folks. I met everybody. I was like, I will just meet every single person. I will collaborate with every single person, like crazy stuff, Lisa. We would have like fashion nights at the mattress store and networking events at the mattress store. And I was on podcasts. So that's when I realized like the power of collaboration in visibility. I'll say this, my husband and I did decide to transition out of that mattress store. Those collaborations that I made 8 years ago are still serving me today. I am connected to so many of those people still. And people will pop up all the time and say like, oh, I remember coming to that ladies' night at your mattress store. Just yesterday, I was at Starbucks and I bumped into someone and she's like, I remember you from your mattress store. So the collaborations you make today, it's like a ripple effect of visibility. So it just increases exponentially. And that's why I'm so incredibly passionate about it.
Oh, I love that. Actually, my husband and I used to do wedding photography, and people that we connected with, and I guess in a sense collaborated with brides and grooms, right? We were working together, still connected to this day. And one of my top guests, Mallory Jackson, who is like such a phenomenal resource when it comes to mental health. She was one of our brides back in the day. So that's a connection and that's networking. And I'd love it then if you could make the distinction, though, when we say collaboration, because there's one thing to get out there and network. And when you said scary, I was like, said on behalf of introverts everywhere. So yes, it can be scary, but even more so, not only, connecting, networking, maybe making referrals, but when we say collaboration, where are we going with this?
Yeah, great differentiation. So there is a total, I use a little math equation. Okay. So collaboration is basically 1 + 1 equals something bigger than two, or something bigger than one, actually, really. It's basically joining forces with somebody else to create something bigger than yourself. It could look like, and some of those things that I did do at that mattress store were collaborations without even me even realizing it. Like being on someone else's podcast,
Yeah.
that's a collaboration. Having a client is a collaboration. Being on someone else's Facebook Live, doing your own Facebook Live and bringing someone else on, running events together, sponsoring an event is a collaboration. It's basically anything where you're saying, I'm going to contribute either part of my audience, part of my energy, part of my time, part of my resources. You're going to contribute that on your end, and we're going to create something bigger than ourselves. I think that's where we often think of just like, oh, we're doing an event together. Like that's a collaboration, but there's so many different ways to do it. I mean, being a guest blogger on someone's website is a form of collaboration. So those are just some examples. You could branch those off and think of hundreds more. And one I really love to give is creating something that no one has created before. Like there are still so many ideas out there that are not, they're just floating around in the ether, waiting for us to grab them and turn them into something of our own. So that's something to remember too. Like when two brains come together, sometimes the magic that can occur is wild.
What I love about podcasting is the magic in a conversation because you don't know where things are going because you're not the only one in it. But the minute you described that creating something greater and maybe even something new that hasn't been done before, I started to think about conversations we've had on the podcast before about when we combine different kinds of strengths, complementary strengths. That's where magic happens because there are many things you may be capable of doing. But when someone comes and balances you out in a complementary way, suddenly you're creating things like, whoa, wait a minute. This is incredible. That to me is the power of collaboration. And I love how you described it, that it could be in so many different ways, like where you're supporting one another and you're basically in agreement to say, we're going to come together and support each other in something that's being created, whether you're creating it, I'm creating it, we're co-creating it, any and all of the above, that is collaboration.
And to your point of strengths, which I think is a great piece of this, sometimes a collaboration looks like, okay, we have actually very similar strengths and we're just going to amplify what we're doing with these strengths. Like I'll just give some tangible examples. So let's say I work with another content writer or another copywriter and do a workshop that's like very focused on that. So we're then taking a very similar strength and bringing it together, or very similar skill set and bringing it together. But you might also look for gaps in your strengths and in your skill sets and bring someone in to fill those gaps. So it can look different depending on what you're looking for in the experience itself. And it is important to know each other's strengths. And like, let's say one of my weaknesses is admin, which it's not. But let's just pretend one of my weaknesses is admin and I'm participating in planning an event with somebody and one of their weaknesses is admin. Guess what's really going to be lacking in the event planning? The admin.
Exactly.
Yeah. So those are all questions to ask yourself as you're getting started. Like, do I have gaps that I really need filled? And if not us, who is going to fill that gap?
Yeah, that's an important thing. And I love this idea of thinking about where you'd like to go depending upon what you're creating, whether you want to amplify something and then suddenly you're getting people across the board who have a strength or who have a specific knowledge. So we know some of the benefits personally, but let's talk a bit about what it's doing to help your visibility. Maybe it would be good to describe really what visibility means, because I think the last time you and I chatted, you said sometimes people they're a little off with that, right? They're not quite sure what they mean by visibility. So what do you mean by it?
I think a lot of people think of it as though you're driving on the highway and you pass this billboard, right? And there's your face or your company. You have all these followers on Instagram, and that's visibility. But at the end of the day, I think visibility is putting you in front of the people that your message needs to connect with. So that could be for the reason of getting more clients. That could be for the reason of growing your community. That could be just because you are a soul on a mission and you have a message to share. But it's getting yourself in the spots where those people are there to hear your message. Visibility could be as simple as being in front of one person and connecting with that person. So it can look different. Again, it depends on your unique business and your unique goals. But what it's not is look, it's the me show. It's a connection between who you're getting in front of and who you are.
I like that idea of visibility even being connecting in front of one person, reaching that one person. There's a couple of great things about that concept. One, of course, is the fact that so often we're running down the path of quantity constantly instead of quality. And the other is that it gives us permission to create something in a really natural, organic, instinctive way where we're not worried about is this going to reach enough people or am I going to hit certain numbers? I think it lets the heart into it when you think that it can be any range, any number of people. It's really just about reaching your people.
And on that vein, I think, this whole year, well, 2022 for me has been all about visibility. And I think one thing I really learned, because I did a lot, I was in a lot of places. And one thing I really learned is when I show up from a place of being really excited to be there and really enthusiastic about the places I'm choosing to be visible, it just feels so much better to me and also the people that are interacting with where I'm visible.
Yeah, they can tell.
Yeah.
So with that, let's get into what makes a good collaboration. What are we looking for? What are the pitfalls we'd like to avoid? And what are we striving for with a collaboration?
Great question. So I hate to say this, but I feel like I've learned the hard way with some of this stuff. And I think that you're going to miss sometimes. Sometimes you are naturally, as hard as you try to filter things out, sometimes you just don't strike gold. That said, there are some things to look for. So, one thing I've been really getting better about looking for is the value alignment. Like, do our values align? And I don't need to ask somebody like, do you value success or money or love? But I want to know that the direction we're headed in is not one that's like diametrically opposed to where I'm going. Let's say you have a community that is all about like high fashion and just showing up perfectly and go, go, go and hustle, hustle, hustle. And then you, Lisa, come on there and you're giving this message about how we can be productive, peacefully, calmly breathing. It just might not align.
It's not going to hit.
And that's okay. I think that's the other thing. It's like if the values don't line up, you're allowed to say no to opportunities because it leaves you open to being available for other opportunities that are a good fit. So values is a huge one. And again, sometimes you can't just flat out ask somebody like, so what are your values? What I've started doing is being a little bit more of a researcher behind the scenes. I get very excited about things. So it's hard for me not to just like instantly reach out to somebody and be like, be on my podcast or do this thing with me. So I've had to slow my roll down a little bit and watch them a little bit, look at their social media, listen to some of their episodes, take my time soaking up. Is there anything that stands out to me in what they're sharing that's like, whoa, I do not agree with that, or that isn't for humans, like they're not standing for human beings. So things like that to listen to, that's a huge lesson, I think, from this past year. So values is my first one.
Mm-hmm.
Once you're like, okay, this checks out. This is an individual I would like to collaborate with. When you come together and decide on that collaboration, you need to be clear in your expectations. So Lisa has a great process for that with her podcast guests. You fill out a questionnaire and it says, here's where I would like the conversation to go. And Lisa says, yes, these are my expectations for the conversation. So it's like she's being very clear with what I expect you. I expect you to come prepared. I expect you to give value to my audience. Here are my expectations. And I, as the podcast guest, say, yes, I agree to these expectations. There's no lack of clarity there. And we can do the same when we're planning an event or when we're sharing someone's platform. Like I do tell people, I have a little spot in my own podcast form that says like, where will you be sharing this? I want to know that you're going to share it and help girl out. And there's all sorts of ways to do that. But I think coming to the table saying, this is my vision for this, and making sure that you're both clear on that and the expectations are clear going in. There can be so many unsaid things, and then that leads to unsaid resentments and things crashing and burning. And that's not what we want. We want successful, positive collaborations where everybody walks away feeling like that was even better than I expected.
Yes, so much yes. And to your point about the clarity, of course, it's great if you can do it up front and as you're learning. And I get that when you first start out, if collaboration is new to you, just like with, any kind of collaboration, but we talk in terms of like podcast guesting, for example, that may be a thing where you say yes more than you might in the future. It may take a while because you want the experience, because you are learning. Sometimes you learn by getting in there and being like, oh, that's what Emily meant. That not working. Got it. Okay. Sometimes you have to be in it. And I know that I went through that myself. For years, I said yes to a lot of things. And then I started to learn, okay, this is where I fit and where I don't. And interestingly, my word of the year for 2022 is fit. And it reminds me to say, is this really going to work? And I had an interesting situation where I've been lucky enough now that I have the experience of being a guest, of being a host, and being invited on podcasts, not just seeking them out. And I had one instance where I thought, I don't know if our values are aligned overall. I did the thing that you said, the cyber stalking and like, is this going to work? But I really loved the conversation. It actually centered around mental health and productivity. And I wanted to talk about this. It's an overarching like message that I want to constantly be nurturing. So I flat out asked the host about my concerns, and it was a wonderful response. And it was exactly the response I needed to know that I could go into this collaboration, be a guest, and be confident and comfortable in doing so. And it ended up being a phenomenal episode. So the lessons learned, and it can work. Just keep communicating.
Yeah, I love that example. And you're so right about so many bad fits teaching you what a good fit is. And I also think that bad fits can help you clarify what's important to you and what your message is and what your values are. So you might not even be 100% clear on what your values are and what your expectations are. And these kind of experiences can help you get that clarity.
Love that. Okay, so value alignment, so important. Being clear in expectations both ways. That's number 2. Anything else?
Yeah, I would say I have 3 more. Trust is a huge one. So, not just trusting the other person, but trusting that what they say they're going to do, they're going to do. So, trusting that there's follow through, right? So, let's say, I hate to keep using podcasting as an example, but let's say you and I get off this interview and you say, oh, yeah, I'm going to air this in January. And then you just never air it. And maybe you don't even explain it to me, And so you've sort of like violated my trust. Like, well, why didn't she follow through on that thing? So whatever you're saying, whatever you're committing to as a collaborator and with the people that you're collaborating with, there needs to be a level of trust that the follow through is going to happen. I've been in situations where I've been planning something with someone else and they say, oh, yeah, I got that. I got that. And then at the end of the day, they actually didn't have it. And you, the other person, is left holding the bag. So I think that trust in follow through is a huge one. And that goes into my next one, which is effort. And like, it's not just physical effort, but also like time effort. So like It doesn't need to be 50-50, but it does need to feel good for both people, the amount of effort that's being put in. And I'll give you a recent example. I planned a big event here in New Hampshire in September, and we both kept saying, like, I don't feel like I'm doing enough. That's what you want. Like, we both kept saying that. And that's a sign to me that we were both putting in a lot of effort. And I kept thinking, I'm not doing as much as she is. And she was thinking, I'm not doing as much as she is. That's what you want. So it doesn't need to be 50-50. Again, that could have been 15 and 85, but it's just the way we worked. So the important thing at the end of the day is that you are both putting in effort to achieve this goal and not just leaving it all to one person, unless that's what you discussed in your clarity portion.
That's fair. Again, going back to the communication of it. And when you're describing this effort, so it's both stepping up equally. I immediately also think bringing equal energy to the project. And I felt that the first time you and I met. I was like, oh, she's going to show up and do this thing. Yes. And we feed off of that excitement with each other, and that boosts the energy of the entire project. But it feels really good too. And you'll notice everything you're describing reminds me of friendships, of relationships, right?
Totally.
Yeah, where you want that person to show up as excited and as dedicated. Mistakes happen, things don't get done. That's fine. That's being human. But if you can trust, right, and see the effort that someone is making, it feels really good. And that sustains a really positive and effective collaboration, at least in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, of course, you want somebody to show up and have that same enthusiasm that you do. So the effort goes even after it, like when it comes time to share and talk about it and things like that. So it can look different depending on what your skill set is. And we talked about skills at the beginning, so I won't get into that. But I think at the end of the day, it really boils down to commitment with each other. And that's being committed to the collaborations that you're in. And this is why it is so important to choose them wisely, because how many of you, I'm raising my hand, how many of you have overcommitted yourself and you just can't give 100% to the things that you're committing to? That is not what you want, especially when you're collaborating with somebody else. Fine, do it for your own projects. I don't care. But when you're collaborating with somebody else, it is a commitment to that person, to that project, to that idea, to bring it to life and create something bigger. So be committed to the collaborations that you're part of. And if it doesn't feel good, I don't know. I think that there's another one waiting that does.
I fully believe that. Okay, so the values, clarity and expectations, trust and follow through, the effort, having that equal energy, that equal commitment. Is there another one in there?
Well, we talked about skills at the beginning. Yeah. Skills and strengths.
Yeah, and I think that's really important to match that, because I think that can also help with the energy. And it can help managing expectations too, to be like, okay, so we're both really good at this, but this is where a gap is going to be. So let's stay focused on that and figure out a way to work around that. You can't solve the problems that you don't know about.
At the end of the day, that's a huge piece of this too, is awareness of yourself.
Yeah.
Awareness of, all right, what do I really want out of this collaboration? Or am I just here because I'm absolutely excited to be here? Am I trying to get something here? Or am I just like in this because I'm enthusiastic and I feel like this is a win-win for both of us, no matter what we're doing?
And let's elevate that. We're going to do an auditory highlight because I really like that part of it. It's just a good reminder. It is very easy for us to step into something and be like, but really, what do I bring to the table? Or feel like you're not bringing enough. And I mean that more in a way of that feeling of not enoughness that pervades our society and that I'm like up on my soapbox rallying against. By showing up enthusiastically and committing and offering the skills and the talents you have, you are more than enough. You are worthy of collaboration. So just want to point that out, because there's a distinction between, am I doing enough because you really want to over deliver and you're excited, versus, but what do I have to offer? So remember, you have plenty to offer.
Remember, you are a hot ticket.
Yeah. Okay. So I think the last thing I'd love to get into is where are we going to find these great collaboration opportunities, Emily?
Sometimes it's is as basic as pitching to podcasts to be on other people's podcasts, right? Sometimes it is simply asking for the collaboration. If you don't ask, you don't know the answer. I also think that a lot of collaborations, for me at least, have been born out of those one-to-one connections, like the coffee chats that just turn into like, whoa, great idea. And then suddenly we're in a collaboration with one another. And sometimes they come from friendships that I've built over the years. So I guess my point is never underestimate where it's going to come from. But sometimes I'll say this, people aren't like banging down my door to collaborate with me. I'm a lot of the one instigating collaborations, and I know that about myself. So that is another reason I need to be wise about the ones I'm choosing. But when somebody is banging down my door, it's often because of a long-term relationship or friendship that we've built. So they can come from all different places. Sometimes people will be constantly approaching you to collaborate with you. Sometimes you might need to do a little bit more legwork. But I'm sure we could think of like some really specific resources, but like being in Facebook communities, for example, that are specific to what you're doing, what you're building, I have found that to be some really helpful places to find thought leaders that I'm just like, for example, I really wanted to have somebody on my podcast speaking about neurodiversity. And guess how I found that individual? Through a Facebook group. So thinking about things like that, like where are my ideal collaborators hanging out? I love collaborating with website designers, tend to know other website designers, and they always refer me like, okay, I've worked with Emily. She works with my brain. She can work with your brain, that kind of thing. So, I mean, that's not a great tangible answer.
No, I think that's plenty tangible because everything that you said in there, you're right. Facebook groups there's so many that are topic specific, right? Movement specific, if you will. So if there's something important to you, if there's something about your mission, where your people hang out, whatever it happens to be, that's a great place to be. And keeping in mind that the same places that you go to, find leads, and as you said, having a client is a collaboration. So you go to the same places to make the connections. And then from there, you could decide. I've met many people who are like, okay, you may not be a client for me, but you're definitely someone with whom I could collaborate.
Yes.
Or you're someone who could be an advocate for me, or could be a referral partner. And then also what you said here is you can ask for referrals. And the best way to do that is to find qualified people that could refer you. And so great guests, for example, also know other great people. Like attracts like. So you ask them, hey, do you know someone else who could speak on this topic or would just be a good fit for the podcast or could, come join me at this event, whatever it happens to be. And the other one that I will add to this list is simply thinking about the people that you follow, that you find that you respect. A great example of this does relate to the podcast. I wanted to find someone to speak about ClickUp. And I had been following Layla Pumper on YouTube. Phenomenal teacher. I loved what she was doing. Now, there are groups out there and there are a lot of people who like ClickUp and they can speak to it, but I just really respected what Layla was doing. I liked her style. She just felt like a really good fit. So I reached out to her directly, made the ask, and I was delighted that she said yes. And I even said, I'm like, you can say whatever you want about it. This is not like a pro platform kind of podcast. This is is it right for you? And what do we need to know? Pros and cons, lay it all out. You can say whatever you want. She's like, yes. So that's a great example. Find the people you respect. And like you said, you got to ask, and you just never know what will happen.
I have been so surprised at the people I didn't think would say yes to things like I'll read a book and then reach out to the author and be like, will you be on my podcast or will you do a workshop with me? And they say yes. And I'm like, oh my goodness gracious.
That's amazing, right?
It can always surprise you, but you know when it can't surprise you is if you don't ask.
So true. Okay. Any other thoughts before we wrap this up, Emily?
one last thing is just like, if you are curious about collaborating, try it in small ways and start building that collaboration muscle up, because you're going to learn a lot about yourself and you're going to learn a lot about other people as you go. So it can almost be like a staircase, where you kind of build up to bigger collaborations. So start small, start really small, do a Facebook Live with somebody, share a platform.
Yes, that is such good advice. You want to keep the risk and even the energy and the time, the commitment really lower. It's not the commitment itself. You're still committed to coming together, co-creating or supporting each other in some way, but you're keeping the risk of it low enough that you can try it out without feeling like it's going to take you down if it doesn't work.
Exactly.
Such good advice. Okay, now before we get into the rapid wrap up, tell us where we could find you online.
I think the best spot is just emilyaborn.com. And my last name is like acorn with a B, as in boy.
Well, I'll have that in the show notes. And I also say you are here listening to a podcast right now, so be sure to pop over to She Built This. Emily's podcast is amazing, not just because I've been a guest on it.
Thank you. I would love to have you.
Okay, rapid wrap-up time. Would you please fill in the blank for me? A song that lifts my spirits, makes me dance.
I can't get that song that's on Reels right now out of my head. I want to dance with somebody.
I want to dance with somebody. That does make you dance. And that is going on the Spotify Positively Living Podcast Dance Playlist, Volume 3, I'm pretty sure.
That is a mouthful.
I know. Woo! All right. How about a quote or a mantra that inspires me, that I love to share?
Okay. I actually just read this in a book this morning. I'm reading a book on instincts of the Enneagram, and I do not know the author's name off the top of my head, but I wrote down this quote and I love it. True inner work is not a change of state, but a state of being. And I just loved it.
Wow.
I know. I don't have many mantras, so I love like a good singer like that.
Okay. Instincts of the Enneagram. We have talked about the Enneagram on the podcast, so I will make sure to find that book and put it on the favorites page, positivelyproductive.com/favorites. You'll be able to find that book there if you were curious. A resource. Besides this book, it could be another book, it could be an app, it could be anything, not necessarily related to collaboration, that has made my life better is?
Okay, it actually does relate to collaboration a little bit. I'm obsessed right now with HoneyBook, the automation tool / just wonderful client portal. It's really made my life easier by condensing like 5 different tools I was using into one. So that's my current obsession, Lisa. I don't use a lot of apps in my life, and I feel like the ones I do, I choose really intentionally.
Cool. I'm going to add that to the list. Okay, and last but definitely not least, what are you grateful for today, Emily?
Well, I'm grateful for you and this opportunity. So thank you so much. And I'm grateful for the community that just keeps on rippling out from these kind of conversations. It is like amazing how many people know you, that know me, that know Alicia, that it just like is this really amazing ripple effect that we're creating.
Yeah, and how we share so fully, and it keeps coming back to you. It's like smiles. You can't give them away. They just keep coming back, and it's a beautiful thing. Well, I am certainly grateful for you and all that you do for so many communities, women entrepreneurs, and for podcasters. And I'm delighted not only to call you a fellow collaborator, but now a friend. So thank you, Emily, for shining your light so brightly in this world and for sharing it with us today.
Thank you, Lisa. And the feeling is mutual.
Thank you for joining me today. Your time is precious and limited, and I'm honored you chose to spend it with me. If you have feedback, questions, or want to schedule a chat, head to positivelyproductive.com/connect. And if you are looking for any of the resources referenced on the podcast, from books to products to training and more, go to positivelyproductive.com/resources.